In the dark, dank recesses of the world, where rot festers and shadows coil, lies a chittering, ravenous menace. They are the Skaven, a wretched race of rat men, born from the mire and decay of forgotten places. To some, they are merely tales whispered in fear. To others, they are the creeping death that rots cities from beneath. These creatures embody a twisted reflection of humankind, driven by endless hunger, boundless treachery, and an ambition so all-consuming that it rivals even the gods. Disease and betrayal are their currency, and ruin is the gift they leave behind. Once, the Skaven dwelled in the sewers and tunnels of the old world, scheming beneath the notice of the powerful empires that stood above. There they amassed armies in secret, their ranks swollen with diseased bodies and twisted inventions, all in service to the great horned rat, a vile deity, as wicked, ambitious, and insatiable as his followers. But when the world that was crumbled and fell to ruin, the Skaven, ever resilient, slithered forth into the mortal realms of Age of Sigmar, the setting that came after Warhammer Fantasy. Now they thrive in a new setting, lurking beneath the cities of Sigmar's empire, spreading their filth and plotting their endless schemes across the realms, both mortal and immortal. They are a unique and malevolent force, infamous for backstabbing and betrayal, for crafting plagues and war machines, and for their twisted faith that promises little more than endless gnawing at the foundations of reality itself. In this video, we will explore how the Skaven came to be, and how they managed to somehow survive the destruction of the world that was, and how they are now wreaking havoc in the mortal realms, and what has changed ever since. The Skaven's rise in the old world is a shadow tale of secrecy and terror. For centuries, they were dismissed as mere myth, a ghostly threat blamed for disease, missing livestock, and strange happenings in the night. But beneath the cities of the Empire, in the caves of Bretonnia, and under the dwarfen halls, an insidious force festered. To admit the Skaven were real was to acknowledge a threat that undermined the very foundation of civilization. But the Rat-Men continued their schemes in the dark, a hidden menace, biding their time to emerge from the shadows and claim the world in the name of their twisted god. The origins of the Skaven can be traced back to a Tillian poem that describes the tale of the doom of Kavzar, as it tells of a once thriving city built by humans and dwarfs, where ambition ran high. Seeking glory, its people began to construct a high towering temple to their gods. As the temple only grew higher and higher, it was progressively more difficult to reach the top and complete it, until it reached a point where it was almost impossible to continue. At this critical moment, legends speak of a strange hooded figure that appeared, urging them to let him finish the tower, with only one condition: that he would be able to place a dedication to his god. The people, seduced by his words and thinking that they had nothing to lose by letting this stranger give it a try, let him climb the tower to finish it and make his offering. On that day, at midnight, the skies unleashed a terrible storm. Rain fell without stopping, the earth trembled, and from below, swarms of rats began to grow and multiply. Only days later, the innumerable rats surged forth, consuming the city in a frenzy of teeth and darkness. From this nightmare, the Skaven were born, creatures of the great Horned Rat, who had claimed the city as his own. Kavzar became the Skaven's first stronghold, the birthplace of their under-empire. The Skaven that were born from Kavzar are a twisted reminder of how mortal ambition, when tainted by darkness, can lead to an empire built on corruption and ruin. On this channel, we have covered in more detail the origins of the Skaven, so if you're interested in diving deeper in that topic, you can do so by checking out the suggested video, or checking out the links in the description. Under the watchful, malevolent gaze of the great Horned Rat, the Skaven set their ambitions on nothing less than total domination of the surface world. Each clan, a cog in the twisted machine of Skaven society, had a unique role in this grand scheme. Clan Pestilence, infamous for its zealous priests and diseased acolytes, unleashed plagues so virulent they could turn entire cities into festering graves. How could any empire defend itself from a foe that spreads pestilence as easy as a passing breeze? To the followers of Clan Pestilence, sickness was not merely a weapon, it was a sacrament, a sign of their god's favor. Then there was Clan Scryer, whose twisted inventors fused magic and machinery in ways that defied both logic and morality. Their infernal devices, warp fire throwers, doom wheels, and warp lightning cannons, turned battlefields into smoking craters and shattered fortifications that had stood for centuries. Each invention was more lethal than the last, as if destruction itself were a game to them. Who could stand against an army that wielded not only steel, but the raw power of chaos? For Clan Scryer, these inventions weren't just weapons. They were reflections of the boundless potential of unchecked ambition and ruthless innovation. Meanwhile, the silent assassins of Clan Eshin operated in the shadows, bringing death to those who posed a threat to Skaven plans, or sometimes just for the thrill of it. Masters of stealth and espionage, Eshin's assassins struck without warning, slipping poison into a lord's chalice, or slitting a general's throat in the dead of night. Many wars and conflicts were twisted and altered by the timely intervention of the ever-lurking Eshin assassins. Their presence was felt in whispered rumors and flickering candlelight, leaving those in power to wonder who could be next. Clan Moulder, hidden in the depths of Hell Pit, was infamous for its grotesque mastery of fleshcraft, creating monstrous horrors that blur the line between beast and nightmare. Here, twisted packmasters breed towering rat ogres, ravenous giant rats, and unspeakable abominations, all driven by hunger and bound by cruelty. These living weapons, crafted through unspeakable experiments and sustained by pain, were sold to other Skaven clans, their savagery tipping the scales in battles where sheer ferocity and brutality was needed. For Clan Moulder, flesh is clay, twisted to serve the Skaven's endless thirst for conquest. and their beasts stand as dark symbols of their power to warp nature itself. Clan Mors was said to be one of the most powerful and ambitious of the Skaven clans, known for its relentless drive to dominate all others. Under the leadership of the infamous warlord Queek Headtaker, Clan Mors rose through sheer brutality and cunning, expanding its power through conquest and relentless aggression. The clan's armies were vast, with legions of hardened warriors who struck fear even among their fellow Skaven. Where other clans relied on subterfuge or strange creations, Clan Mors wielded raw military strength, often leading assaults against both rivals below and enemies on the surface. Driven by ambition and an insatiable lust for power, Clan Mors embodied the ruthless Skaven spirit, willing to slaughter thousands without thinking too much about it, all in the name of claiming dominance over all. If you want to get a detailed dive into the great Skaven clans, you can do so by checking out the suggested video or checking out the links in the description. In the twilight days of the world that was, Archaon the Ever-Chosen was crowned as the champion of the Chaos Gods and the herald of the Apocalypse. He was the one to unite all tribes of Chaos worshippers and bring them over the old world like a storm that consumed all. This world-shattering period was known as the End Times.
In those last days I saw things no mortal should. Fires that never died, black skies and shadows that seemed to breathe. They say Archaon himself marches at the head of the horde, that he's come to drag us all into ruin. By night I hear drums echoing in the distant north, feel the ground tremble beneath my feet. Even the animals sense it. The livestock grow restless, and the crows circle like they know something we don't. It's as if the land itself dreads what's to come. My husband went north, hoping to join the militia. They were calling all able men. But that was months ago now, and I haven't seen him since. My son, still a youngling, took up a spear shortly after he left. He swears he'll defend me, but he's just a lad. I should be teaching him to plant the fields, to mend his own clothes, not to wield a weapon against creatures made out of nightmares. And me? I sit here, praying behind these thin wooden walls, clutching the old family relic, a worn Sigmarite pendant my mother gave me. I whisper every prayer I know, but the words feel as hollow as my heart. They say the Ever-Chosen, as some call him, brings the end. And by the gods, it feels as if even the light itself is afraid to rise come morning. When the horrors of the north get here, will even the gods hear our cries? Or have they already turned away?
Amidst the fall of empires and the end of mortal hope, it is said the turmoil and the destruction was so great that a fifth deity rose to join the dark pantheon of the major chaos gods. The great Horned Rat, the chittering, plague-ridden deity of the Skaven, rose to become the fifth chaos god, seizing his place among them as a god of pestilence, corruption, and endless hunger. His children, the Skaven, had long been a blight on the surface of the old world, gnawing away at its very foundations, lurking in the shadowy corners, festering in its underbelly, waiting for their moment. And when the end finally came, when chaos swept across the lands like a blackened tide, the Skaven were there to feast, swarming over the decaying corpse of civilization in teeming, uncountable hordes. But their feeding frenzy did not last forever. even as they gorged themselves on the dying breaths of the old world. The final victory of chaos threatened to consume them too. And yet, the great horned rat, cunning as ever, would not let his children perish with the world they had plagued. In that cataclysmic moment, he acted, reaching out with clawed hands to snatch up great masses of his terrified, screeching brood, rescuing them from utter annihilation. But where did he take them? How could a god so tied to decay and ruin find refuge in the birth of a new reality? Skittering through the dark void, his eyes gleaming with malicious intent, the great horned rat found his answer in the forming mortal realms. Realms as fresh and full of promise as they were vulnerable to corruption. He scattered his Skaven into the hidden crevices and shadowed corners of these newborn worlds, where they would multiply, infest, and gnaw at creation's foundations once more. And so, a new era of treachery began, as the children of the great horned rat set their sights on this untainted reality, bound to a singular purpose: to infest, to conquer, to consume. In the mortal realms, Skaven society remains a twisted, ruthless hierarchy, with each clan vying for dominance beneath the watchful gaze of the great horned rat. While many of their old practices persist, treachery, betrayal, and backstabbing being as foundational as ever, their environment in the age of Sigmar has forced certain adaptations. Now, instead of lurking only beneath cities and hidden tunnels, Skaven infest entire realms, spreading like a living plague across vast, unclaimed landscapes. They still maintain their under-empire, but in this new realm of magic and shifting realities, they've grown bolder, more ambitious, and even more unstable. Leadership remains a chaotic and deadly affair, with power shifting from one warlord or seer to another based on strength, cunning, or sheer luck. The Skaven still follow the rule of the strongest, or the most conniving, and leaders are as disposable as ever. The great horned rat's presence looms even larger here, not only as a member of the Chaos Pantheon, but as an active god whose influence seeps into every dark corner. His demands are relentless, and the Skaven, his loyal and equally terrified followers, answer by expanding his reach in the realms. They spread plague and corruption in the name of conquest, building twisted shrines and wicked temples to their vile deity wherever they go. Each clan has adapted in its own way. Clan Pestilence, for instance, has thrived in the new realms, finding fresh environments to corrupt with their infectious diseases and blighted practices. Clan Scryer, on the other hand, has capitalized on the vast reserves of magical energy, channeling these raw forces into even deadlier, more chaotic weaponry. Clan Molder has found new creatures to capture, twist, and meld into monstrous war beasts, while Clan Eshin has used their ever-shifting territories to their advantage, perfecting the arts of assassination and espionage in this magical, fractured landscape. In the world that was, the Skaven thrived in darkness, slipping through sewers, burrowing tunnels, and infesting the hidden cracks of cities and fortresses. Their strength lay in their ability to remain unseen, lurking beneath the surface as a disease festers within the body. They were masters of exploiting every physical weakness, creeping through hidden crevices, undermining walls, and infesting the forgotten places of the world. But in the mortal realms, where reality itself is a more malleable, unstable fabric, the Skaven have discovered a terrifying new advantage. They can gnaw through the very boundaries of existence itself. Now, these creatures don't simply claw their way into cities and fortresses, they burrow through the thin veil separating realms. The Skaven's unique ability to adapt to their surroundings has only strengthened their ambitions. No longer limited by the constraints of the world that was, they now infest floating cities, jungle realms, shadowed fortresses, and realms bathed in pure light. The following story gives an example of the Skaven's ability to adapt and be an ever-present danger. After 18 years of relentless battles, the famed elven Drakelord Fate Brightblade returned to Azerheim victorious. His arrival ignited celebrations throughout the city. Citizens thronged the streets to honor the commander who had braved the nightmares of Shazmodak's jungles to drive out the Skaven scourge. Brightblade's journey had been marked by untold horrors and profound personal sacrifices. Yet his name became a shining example of courage. The Grand Assembly hailed him as a hero for the cause of reclaiming the realms, and his legacy became one woven with both triumph and reverence. But that very night, the mood shifted from jubilation to dread. At dawn, Brightblade was found dead, slumped in his chair within the sealed safety of his quarters atop the impregnable Tower of Triumphs. His face was locked in a rictus of terror, his veins thick with a dark poison, his eye sockets empty. Marking his chest was a fresh wound, the unmistakable rune of Clan Eshin, carved like a sinister signature. The shocking scene shattered the illusion of security, leaving the people of Azerheim to question how even their brightest hero had fallen victim to such a gruesome, shadowed enemy. Verminlords are powerful demonic entities in the Age of Sigmar, serving as manifestations of the great horned rat, the malevolent deity worshipped by the Skaven. These towering figures embody the cunning, treachery, and insatiable hunger characteristic of their race, acting as both leaders and manipulators within the chaotic hierarchy of Skaven society. Verminlords are categorized into various types, each reflecting different aspects of their god and specializing in unique abilities. Known for their aggressive nature, Warbringers are often seen leading Skaven armies into battle. They wield powerful weapons like doomglaives and punch daggers, inspiring their followers to acts of ferocity. Their dramatic entrances often involve tearing through reality itself to manifest on the battlefield. The presence of a Verminlord Warbringer on the battlefield can inspire overwhelming fear and aggression among Skaven troops, transforming cowardly clan rats into frenzied warriors eager for bloodshed, even at the expense of their own pitiful lives. Verminlord Deceivers are the silent, deadly assassins of Clan Eshin, wielding demonic power paired with an eerie mastery of stealth. Cloaked in swirling shadows, they slip unnoticed through the darkness, their voices murmuring in ominous whispers that echo 13-fold. Each tone a layer of subtle deception. On the battlefield, they unleash blistering speed, driving warp stilettos between their victims' ribs in a flash, or hurling spinning doom stars that slice through heads before whipping back to their waiting claws. These killers are as precise as they are ruthless, embodying the lethal cunning of one of the Skaven's most sinister clans. These demons are embodiments of pestilence and decay, wielding power over the plague clans. They are formidable demon warriors capable of infecting powerful foes with disease through their weapons, such as Plague Reaper sickles. A massive, rusted blade leaves trails of noxious vapors, capable of infecting any who breathe them in with agonizing sickness. Corruptors focus on spreading corruption and despair among their enemies, as well as their followers alike. They can spread foul plagues that can ravage entire armies before they even set foot on the battlefield. The Corruptors don't just kill, they rot everything around them, tainting soil, air, and flesh alike. Their plagues are ever evolving, a nightmarish assortment of diseases crafted to bypass any resistance, ensuring that even the slightest wound festers and spreads until the victim succumbs. Acting as prophetic manipulators, Warpseers utilize dark magic to foresee potential futures and influence events from behind the scenes. They carry scry orbs and can unleash devastating spells that drive enemies mad with visions of despair. Their ability to manipulate both allies and enemies makes them formidable players in the ongoing chaos that characterizes Skaven interactions within the mortal realms. These secretive figures guide Skaven through the complex networks of gnaw-holes, using dark magic to navigate dimensions. Their ability to manipulate reality makes them elusive and dangerous, often leading Skaven forces to victory through cunning strategies and unexpected ambushes. These half-mad monstrosities guide the Skaven as they carve paths to plunder the realms. Armed with a Gnaw-glaive, they can slice through the fabric of reality itself, opening new routes to distant realms. Their whip-like prehensile tails lash out with deadly precision, ready to ensnare any who dare cross their path. Additionally, Warpfangs can cloak themselves in a haze of potentialities, weaving through their enemies' blows as fragments of discarded futures and unrealized moments swirl around them, deflecting strikes that would otherwise find their mark. According to legend, one of the most infamous and powerful Verminlords, Screech Vermin King, was born from the ruinous downfall of the 12 Lords of Decay, who once held seats upon the Council of 13. With the 13th seat reserved for the deity known as the Great Horned Rat. These lords, ambitious beyond measure, made a pact to unite for a scheme so audacious that some dared to whisper it was intended to outmaneuver the Great Horned Rat himself. But gods are not easily deceived, especially not the Horned Rat, whose wrath was as boundless as his paranoia. For their insolence, he cast them into a shadowy oubliette, a dark prison outside of time, where they suffered endless torment and punishment. Millennia passed in that accursed prison, each Lord of Decay left to contemplate their defiance in isolation and agony. But the great horned rat is as cunning as he is vengeful, and he had a purpose for them yet. Finally, when the god deemed it fit, he drew them from their prison and reshaped them into a single twisted being. Screech Vermin King. This creature would be a vermin lord unlike any other, armed not only with unrivaled power, but a loyalty forged through terror and subjugation. Now, as a single fearsome vermin lord, Screech Vermin King carried the knowledge and abilities of every Skaven clan within his cursed form, bound to serve his god without question. With mastery over the arcane, the horrific art of flesh crafting, the brewing of plagues, shadow manipulation, warp technology, and the brutal skill of a warrior, Screech Vermin King is an embodiment of the Skaven's darkest arts. He can cast the dreaded 13th spell, a horrific magic that twists his foe into Skaven slaves, and wields the Doomglaive and Plague Reaper with deadly precision in battle. In Screech Vermin King, the great horned rat found a weapon and a servant, whose very existence serves as a warning to all Skaven. True power comes only through total submission to their god's will. The Skaven are more than just another twisted race in the mortal realms. They are, in many ways, a dark reflection of humanity's deepest fears and failings. What makes them so terrifying? Could it be that their worst traits are echoes of our own human weaknesses, exaggerated to monstrous levels? Greed, ambition, paranoia, selfishness, and an unsatiable hunger for power. These are the traits that drive the Skaven, and disturbingly, they are often traits that can be found in the darkest corners of human society as well. In Skaven society, loyalty is an illusion, and alliances are forged only to be broken. How different is this from the cutthroat rivalries and ruthless competition we sometimes see in our own world? For the Skaven, betrayal is as natural as breathing, and every partnership is simply an opportunity to gain the upper hand. They remind us of a world where trust is fleeting, unity is a pretense, and survival belongs to those who wield deceit as a weapon. The Skaven serve as a grim exaggeration of what happens when ambition knows no bounds and treachery becomes second nature. Their tales reveal what can occur when there is no trust, no unity, only an endless spiral of backstabbing and paranoia. Then there is the Skaven's insatiable hunger, their need to consume and devour without end. This extends beyond mere survival. They strip the land bare, consume resources at alarming rates, and move on without a second thought of the destruction left behind. The Skaven shows us the end result of a society driven purely by consumption, a cycle of endless hunger that leaves nothing but ruin in its wake. Speaking about excesses and overconfidence, we are now going to talk about the tale of a clan that grew too powerful and too ambitious for their own good. Their story is short, but it leaves a good lesson for all. Clan Tichritt was one of the original great clans of the Skaven in the New Age. Known for their arrogance and their specialization in chronomatic weaponry, they played a significant role in the Age of Myth. Their ambition eventually led them to launch a full-scale invasion of Thandria, the Endless Kingdom, where they devastated more than half of it. Their aggressive tactics and advanced weaponry initially brought them success. However, this overconfidence resulted in their complete annihilation by Sigmar and his allies, who responded swiftly and effectively erased them from existence. The destruction of Clan Tichritt during the Age of Myth marked a significant moment for the story of the Skaven race in the mortal realms, as the other clans learned from their mistakes and inclined not to grow too overconfident. Their story illustrates how even powerful factions can be completely eradicated due to strategic miscalculations, setting a precedent for later conflicts among the remaining clans during subsequent ages, particularly during the Age of Chaos and beyond. Sealed within the realm of heavens, veiled by ancient impenetrable magic, Sigmar gathers his chosen Stormcast Eternals. He readies them for an assault that will drive back chaos with a force that will echo across the mortal realms. Even Tzeentch, the chaos god of fate, remains oblivious to the scale of Sigmar's ambitions, unaware of the coming tempest. Yet, in the shadows cast by the God King's throne, hidden eyes gleam. Eshin operatives, unseen and silent, witness these final preparations. They slip away undetected, vanishing into secret know-holes to carry this priceless intelligence to their mysterious masters. The tide of war is about to shift, and chaos stands on the edge of a blow unseen in a millennia. And in this unfolding chaos, the Skaven, as ever, see an opportunity ripe for exploitation. In the Pantheon of Chaos, the great horned rat holds a unique and twisted role, elevated to godhood alongside the infamous powers of Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch and Slaanesh. This newfound status as a chaos god has only fueled the Skaven's already boundless ambition, driving them to spread their corruption across the mortal realms with renewed zeal. For the Skaven, the Horned Rat's ascension is a divine mandate, a call to infest, consume, and ultimately dominate all. They believe it is their right to rise above the other forces of chaos, seeing themselves as the chosen race destined to inherit and corrupt reality itself. This fanaticism propels their schemes and wars, pushing the Skaven to outdo their rivals and fulfill the dark visions of their god. The Skaven are no mere pest. They are a force of relentless, all-consuming decay, ever hungry, ever scheming, always waiting in the shadows to gnaw at the very fabric of creation.